you should now see a CodaBears slide, right?
You got it? I'm
Yep.
muted.
All right.
For the remaining inventory questions, I'll go ahead and pull these out of the question dialog. We'll send them over to Bill and me, and we'll get to you guys offline on these questions. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
All right. So we're going to go over updatable BAQs and dashboards. We had a few questions on how to work with BAQs, what to do with subqueries, when do I use them? Actually, let me get to the next slide. That would make more sense. Oh, come on. There we go. So we're going to cover BAQs, when subqueries, when and why do you want to use one? I'll show you how to make an updatable BAQ, which is the first step along the way of creating an updatable dashboard, which is what we had some questions on as well. Dylan will be showing you how to put charts into a dashboard, do a dashboard inside of a customization, do updatable dashboards, and how to get your dashboard on the menu so that you can actually share it with your users instead of just having it out there in creation world. So subqueries, when and why do I want to use a subquery? And for me, subqueries are typically used in two places. One, make your query easier to understand and maintain. So for example, I've got a complex piece of logic or I need to do a complex query to figure out what another piece of data is going to work on. And what I'm going to show you is perhaps I want to pull parts that are of a certain class, and then I want to go find orders for that. Now that's a simplified case. Maybe you'd actually use parts that are sold within the last 3 months where people have ordered over 200 and they're in the state of Louisiana. Now go show me the orders that go with that and the customer information and how did the shipping go. That kind of makes things a little more complex, but if we break that into subqueries, you can do each little part and get it limited down, and you're not trying to manage this whole big, huge thing. So it makes it a little bit easier to work with. The other case that I use subqueries in most commonly is if I want to limit data down. So for example, if I try to say, hey, get me customer data where a customer has always ordered at least $100. I could do that all in the same query. It'd actually be really, really freaking hard. But by doing a subquery, I can kind of get the subquery to get me my customer list, and then I can go pull the customer information in a main query. So again, breaking things up into little more manageable chunks. Also, it makes it easier to debug your query and find out if there's any problems in there. So I'm going to jump right away into demo world here. I'm in 10.2.700 using Swiss Tech is letting me use their training environment kindly. I appreciate it. So to get to BAQs, if you're in the Kinetic interface, if you click on the menu, the easiest thing to do is type in query and you get business activity query. You'll also see it tells you a path to get to system management, business activity queries, or you can go executive analysis, blah, blah, blah. But for me, I'm just looking for query. I don't care where it was on the path. I just want to get to it. So that's why I like the search up there. It's pretty quick and easy. Now, of course, I need to populate my query here. So I'm going to call my first query. We'll just call it emug subquery one. I'll hit tab. It's going to say, hey, I couldn't find that query. Yes, I want to create it. Awesome. And this is going to be an example of orders based on part class. And I'm going to make this shared so that other users can get to it. I'll make it all company so that any company can actually get to it as well. And I'll save my query at that point so that I don't have to worry about changing that again. I'll go over to my query builder here. And you'll notice I start with subquery one. That's fine for now. We're going to change that later. The reason I like to change it is I like my subquery names to actually represent what they're doing. So if you just call it subquery one, subquery two, subquery three, and 6 months later you come back and have to try and adjust what the query is doing, good luck. Have fun digging through all those subqueries. And if you've got 16 subqueries, have fun. So that's why I like to name things, and I'll get to naming those in a bit. So I'm going to start with my part table. I'll just type in part in this search, double click on part, that gets it on my canvas. Now I want to work with parts that are of a certain class. So I'm going to click on my part table, make sure I'm in table criteria here, and then I'll come over to the new for table criteria. So that's down here. Click new. My field is going to be part class or class ID, sorry. And I'm going to set that where I want my class to be equal to a constant. And in the training database, there's a part class called elec. So that's what I'm going to use because it's got a few parts and there's a few orders against it. I could also have done like a list of items. I could choose multiple classes, things like that. I'll come over to my display fields and I'm just going to quickly get some fields on here. So I'm going to drop in company, part num, and we'll order by part num here. And then I'll come over to analyze and hit my test button. Now, a lot of people tell you, hey, hit the analyze to make sure it's okay. I usually jump to test because guess what? If it's not okay, it'll tell me right here that my query is not okay. So doing the analyze and then doing the test is a 2-button click. Doing the test is a 1-button click, and it's going to tell me if I've got problems. So that's why I shortcut it. So you can see I've got 14 parts for company Epic 06. Okay, so now we're going to pull the order information for those parts. So I'm going to come back to Query Builder, and in order for my subquery to work, I actually need to take this sort off. So I'm in the sort order tab, and I'm going to remove that sort. If you don't remove that, when you put that as a subquery, you're going to get an error back that says subqueries can't have an order by clause. Whenever you see that, just go into the subquery, remove the order by or the sort by over here, and that'll fix that up. Now, like I said, I don't like my subqueries to be called subquery 1, subquery 2. That gets confusing. So instead, I'm going to come over to subquery options, and for the name of this subquery, I'm going to call it parts. Now, because it was the first subquery created, it's automatically the top level. In order for it to be used by another query, I need to make it an inner subquery in this case. So I'm going to change that, and then I'm going to go over to my new tab up here. Now this is next to my query dialog or my query name up in this drop down. I can hit the new and it's going to add a new subquery. Guess what? It comes in as subquery 2. If I add it again, it'd be subquery 3, 4, so on and so forth. This is going to be my main query. So I like to always name my main query something obvious. And I try to be consistent so that no matter who looks at my queries, they can always find that main query. Now for me, I usually call it top level or top query. That's because, guess what? Epicor calls it a top level query as well. So I'll typically name my main query top level or top query so that whoever comes back and looks at my query, or if I come back 6 months later, I can easily find, hey, what was the main query? What is the output query, so to speak? So that's why I call it that way. Let's jump over to phrase build. Now you'll notice in my dropdown up here, I'm at the top level query and we've got our blank canvas. If you've not played with subqueries before, you can drop this list down and you can see, hey, I've got a parts subquery. If I select that, there's the guy that we used to work with or that we just worked with. So I'll flip back to my top level. I've got my blank canvas. So now there's a couple things I can do. I'm going to drop in my order detail table to get my order information, and I'll drop in order head, and I'm going to drop in customer. Now Epicor is cool enough that it will actually draw my joins for me. So these lines right here are my joins between my order detail to order head to customer. And it automatically put those joins in for me because it knows how those tables are related. So Epicor BAQ is pretty powerful in that they will automatically figure some things out for you. Now, I will admit, sometimes their default isn't what you're looking for because sometimes there's other ways to join the tables together. So you may want to actually click on the join and come down to your table relations here. And let me expand this out to full screen. I should have done that. There's more space. So now with my join selected, I can see what the fields are being used to join on. And if I want to change that from a join to a left join or a right join, and where they do that is they say, hey, you want all rows from order detail or all rows from order head, you don't have to worry about is it a left or a right. You decide which table you want the rows from, and it will leave blanks in the other. In this case, I want matching rows from order detail to order head, and I want matching rows from order head to customer. I don't want any order heads where there isn't a customer. I don't want details where there aren't order heads. So that's why I'm doing it that way. Now on the order detail, to get my, I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead. I need to get my display fields on here. So we're going to put in from order detail. Come on, click on the thing there. We're going to grab our company. We'll grab our order num, our order line, and I want to get my part num. And I want my cust ID, which is going to be down on my customer. So I'll grab cust ID there. And I'm going to, and I did those all in the sort by. Welcome to a common problem you have with BAQs. It will default the tab to the last, whether you were in sort order or column select. Welcome to the thing that I always forget to do. So let me pull these out. We don't want to sort by order line. We don't want to sort by part num, cust ID. I want to get my column select and do my company, order num, order line, part num. Luckily, Epicor gives you a good UI for BAQs, and you can quickly move things from one to the other. So it's not that hard to change up. So if I do my analyze and test, now I'm currently not using my subquery, okay? But what I want to show you down here is my query returned 528 rows. So that's every order line inside the system for company Epic 06. That's the company that I'm in. So if I come back to Query Builder, I'm going to go to Phrase Build. Now there's two ways I could actually use my subquery, and they're pretty cool. I can come to Order Detail, go to Table Criteria, hit New, and I want to filter on those part numbers, right? So I'm going to come down and choose part number. I can say where the part number is in another set of items. And I can say it's from a field in a specified subquery. Now I have to click on that field from specified subquery and tell it which subquery I want. So if I had more subqueries in here, I would choose whether it's the part subquery or one of the other ones. And I can say, hey, I want it on the part num, and I'll click OK. So now order detail is filtered on our part subquery, pulling back the part num. And we remember we only had like 14, 15 parts in there. So now let's go to analyze. We used to have 528 rows. If I hit test now, I only have 5 order lines that use parts that are of class ELEC. Now I could have done that by joining my order detail to my part and putting the table criteria on the part table as well, but this illustrates how we can do this. Now the other way I could do this, so that was using a table criteria and using the subquery. I'm going to take that table criteria off, and I'm going to join my subquery. Now to get to your subqueries, you have to click this little table icon here, and that changes from using the Epicor tables to using your subqueries. Just double click on the subquery, it shows up, and now I need to draw a connection or a join between my order detail and my parts table. So I just click on the little links, click on order detail, drag and drop onto parts. Now I have to define the relationship. I'm going to add 2 rows just because I know I need 2 rows in here. My order detail field, I need company and I need part num. And on my part subquery, company is going to equal company, part num is going to equal part num. I'll come back over to analyze, test, and I should get those same 5 rows back. That's because I'm using a join instead of the table criteria, so I would expect to get the same number of rows back. I like to teach people whenever you modify your query, go back and reanalyze it, make sure you're getting the number of rows that you expect. Are you getting more rows, less rows, same rows? Is that what you expected to get back? If it's not what you expected, were your expectations false? Did you maybe misunderstand the data? Or is your query wrong? Like you expected there to be fewer rows, you got the same number of rows. Why did that not work? and you've got to figure that out. It could be your join is wrong. It's very easy to accidentally select the wrong item inside of here. So I could actually try to join part num to company. And when I analyze, I would get 0 rows back because obviously there's no part number that matches a company code. So that would tell me, hey, I probably got a problem. Oh, oops. I just need to set this back to part num, come back, analyze test. My query works fine again. So that's an example of where would I use a subquery to kind of help limit things and make my subquery pretty easy to work with. If I wanted to add more items into my list, I could say, or the class ID equals this, or the part number starts with X. So I can make a pretty complex table criteria here, not have to worry about how that's affecting my master query, my top level query. So I can kind of work with them independently. So that makes things kind of nice and easy. I'm going to hit save here so that I can export this query later for y'all. And then we're going to do a new query. Now my second query, I want to show customer info for customers who always order at least $100. So I'm going to come in and do an emug subquery 2, and I'm just going to say order at least $100. And I'm going to speed through this because I didn't realize I was taking up so much time, and I want to make sure Dylan's got his time left. So I'm going to come in. First stuff that I'm going to do is change my subquery to customer order info. And we're going to come in here, and I want to get my customer table. Whoops, customer, there we go. And I want my, you ever have one of those days where you're like, I know I missed a field in here. I want my order detail table. For some reason, you get the feeling you're going to screw this thing up, Fred. I did. Okay. In the interest of time, because I'm screwing this one up when I'm trying to read my things, and I've still got one more query I want to make so that Dylan can use it for his dashboards, I'm going to search for the query, and I will export this properly for y'all. I'm going to grab my FZ subquery 2 that I had out here, and I can show this to you a little bit better. So my customer order info is going to grab my order head table. For my display, I'm grouping on company and customer. So I selected group by on company and customer. I then made 2 calculated fields for the minimum order number and the maximum order number. And the min order amount tells me the min of order head.order amount, and the max is just the max. So I can find out what is the minimum order amount that that customer did, what's the maximum order amount that that customer did. The reason I want that is because I want to find orders for customers who always order at least $100. So that minimum order amount needs to be at least $100, and that's across all of their orders. When I go to my top query, I'll go back to phrase build here. I'm going to take my customer and I'll join it to that subquery. And that subquery has a table criteria where that min order amount is greater than or equal to, and it's hard to see here, 100. So that way I'm putting a limiter on that subquery so that I can then find who are the customers who always order at least $100. And I'll do my analyze here, and we can easily see we've got just 13 customers who have ordered $100 or more with every order. Now that doesn't mean that we also have customers who've ordered $5, $10, $20 as well as over 100, but because they've got orders that are less than 100, we want them out of our thing. Okay, we're not pulling orders that are over 100, we're pulling customers who always order $100. So that gets that query a little more complex. That's why that subquery makes it a little bit easier to work with. Now my final query, I'm just going to load up because I believe Dylan is using the subquery 3, and we'll pull him up. And what I did on subquery 3, actually, let me go back to subquery 2 because the changes I do, I can put into an emug subquery 3. I'm just going to do actions copy query. Let's rename this to emug subquery 3. And we're going to make this our updatable query. I'm going to click shared and all companies, or at least I think I'm going to click shared and all companies. Okay, we'll have to give Epicor a minute to think and get organized here. Or, you know, my system might just be going a little wonky. Come on, come back. This is when I should have just gone with Betty Crocker and pulled out the FZ subquery 3, obviously. Is there a dialogue in the background? Just making sure. Epicor is still here, but my subquery is frozen. Yay! Okay, let me kill Epicor. Maybe. Task manager. Let's kill Epicor because, oh, dope. Okay, so over on my other screen, there was this nice little successful dialog box. That's what was blocking me. At least we found the problem, right? Okay, so I'll click shared, click all companies. Now I want to make this query updatable. I want it so that my dashboard, we can look at the customers who ordered more than 100, and I'm going to let them change some fields on here. So I'm going to come over to my query. I've got it made updatable. I'm going to go to my top level query here. Choink. On my display fields, I'm going to add in the fields that I want my user to be able to change: address, city, state, zip, country. Now, is this realistic? No, but it's a good demo. Now, I tried to save it. It said, hey, you've marked this updatable, but you haven't told me what can be updatable yet. Okay, went a step too soon. So now to make a query updatable, come over to the Update tab. What I need to do is I need to mark what fields am I going to let the user update. So let's say I'm going to let them change address, city, state, zip, and country. Is that dangerous? Probably, but we're going to let them do it. I'm also going to say they could do multiple row updates. Now I could turn off adding new records. I could force that they can only do a single row update, for example. Then I can come over to update processing, do a BPM update, and I have to choose what object is going to be doing the update. In this case, because I'm letting them update customer fields, it's the customer object. That's going to think for a little bit. It's going to figure out what object needs to be used for the updates, and then we're all good. So now, when I go to Analyze, you'll notice my test button is gone. What I have instead are these buttons over here for Get List. It's going to warn me, hey, you're doing an updatable BAQ. Do you really want to do that action? I'll say yes. It's going to think for a second. I get my same list back. And inside the BAQ, I can actually double click an item. It brings up an editor window. So I could change this to Terrence Avenue 2, Chicago 3, hit OK. Highlights the row, meaning it hasn't saved it yet. When you hit the Update button, that's going to do the update to the database. So now that's written to the database, and I've actually updated from the BAQ. And we can take this updatable BAQ and use it in our dashboard. That's where I'm going to flip over to Mr. Dylan. As soon as I can make Dylan the presenter, there we go. Yes. Dylan, are you ready?
I am. Show my screen. Alrighty. So we're gonna. Are you there, Dylan? Yes. Sorry, heard some music. I don't know where it was coming from. But so we're going to go over, adding charts to your dashboard, some of the settings, how to set the X and Y, Z axis when you're adding a chart to a dashboard. Then we're going to go over, a little bit about updatable dashboards, pulling in that updatable query that you created as a BAQ or that Fred created in the demo. And specify which fields can be updated, and also talk about deploying your dashboard. We're going to go over a little bit about how to add your dashboard to a customization as a new tab. No programming is necessary to do this. It's just a little Epicor wizard that's available in the customization tools dialog in developer mode. And we're also going to specify and make the dashboard subscribe to the UI data, which basically means if you're, for example, on sales order entry, the data that pulls into one of those existing fields, like the customer ID, we're going to use that field to automatically query and retrieve data from our dashboard that would be embedded to our customization. And lastly, in our demo, we're going to go over putting a dashboard on the menu via menu maintenance, and then I'll talk a little bit more as we go through the demo about runtime versus assembly, because there's two different menu item types for dashboards. There's dashboard runtime and assembly. And then after that, we'll have time for some questions, hopefully. So I'm going to go ahead and get into my 10.2.700 environment, or SysTech's 10.2.700 environment. And we're going to go and open up our dashboard maintenance. This is an executive analysis, business activity management, general operations, if you're used to navigating through the window, but I always like to use search. So I'll select my dashboard, and then I'll go ahead and start defining a new dashboard. I'm just going to call it email chart demo. Chart demo, and your caption and description can again be whatever you want. You can enable refresh all, which will basically, if you have multiple BAQs or grids on your dashboard, the refresh all button is handy because it'll refresh and pull the data back for all those BAQs. Whereas if you have multiple BAQs without the refresh all feature, you're going to have to click the refresh one inside of each of those grids to get back data. And if you're multi-company, you can check all companies if you want this dashboard to be used in all of your companies, not just the owning company. So once I've defined a dashboard definition, I'm going to go ahead and add a new query here up in the. You can either use the file menu or this little caret off the paper icon here, and I'll select new query. And then I'm going to go ahead and click query ID. And then this is searching for BAQ, so I'm actually going to pull in a query that Fred did and kind of displayed in his presentation. So I'll go ahead and select that guy. And so there's a few tabs here, publish, so you can publish columns. And basically with that, publishing columns are used in either like when you're embedding and subscribing to UI data inside of a customization, or if you wanted to use a column to filter another query that you have in your dashboard and grid based on your filters and criteria of the first grid or this primary parent grid here. Filters, so you can do additional filtering on that BAQ data. So if you want to minimize your results, you can go ahead and use this filter tab here. Parameters, if your BAQ has parameters, you can kind of specify those parameters and get them filled in as well on this tab. Another big thing, auto refresh on load. Depending on your query, if it's returning back a lot of data, or if you're planning on kind of even subscribing with an auto retrieve into an embedded customization, or like using this dashboard in embedded customization, you don't have to check this box. This box is optional. Basically, it just means that this query is going to automatically pull the data anytime somebody loads this dashboard. So we'll leave that unchecked for now. And then I'll go ahead and click OK. So here's my general tab defining my dashboard, and then my dashboard tab. So this is actually what my dashboard looks like. And you can, in this window, hit this refresh button, and it will basically run that BAQ, get the data back. So this is kind of similar to what you're seeing with what Fred was working on. For example, I'm going to add a chart to this dashboard. And you can do that in the left-hand tree view here. You can right-click on your BAQ, not the grid. You always right-click on the BAQ. And when you right-click on there, you can go and select a new chart view. And you'll get a little window like this with your X, Y, and Z axis. Z axis is mostly used kind of for like a 3D graphic view of your data. So for the chart by in this demo, I'm going to go ahead and select customer ID. So on the x-axis, we're going to chart by customer ID, and then let's say on the y-axis, we're going to show the max order amount per customer. So I'll check that. Filter again. You have additional filtering options on the chart itself. So if you want to minimize the amount of data, you can apply some filters. Colors, you can check grayscale. You can change your color model. They just have a few to pick from here. I'm just going to leave it as pure random. And then I'll go ahead and click OK. So you'll notice, by default, it kind of pops up a bar chart here. But as you'll notice in your dashboard, you'll have a little settings tab here that pops out from the side. And if you have your mouse over it, and so it basically shows you some settings that, again, you can change the X and Y and Z axis at this level. You can check the chart all Ys. If you want a legend, you can check for a legend and what side of the graph you want the legend to display on. Chart type. So there's a lot of different chart types, 3D charts, different kind of bar charts, stack charts, line charts, all kinds of charts, depending on what you want to show. There's pie chart, donut chart. For this demo, I'm going to pick the donut chart, and I'm going to click on the refresh label here. And as you can see, based on my settings, I have a legend to my right. Each customer ID has a color, and then depending on who kind of orders the most dollar amount or the max order amount here, it shows me on this chart who orders pretty much the most. So that's pretty standard how to create a grid. So we'll move over into updatable dashboards a little bit. And I'm going to show you how to make this dashboard updatable really quick here. And we'll use our existing dashboard. So if I come up to the properties of our grid view, not our query. So this is when I'm going to go to the properties of the grid view. There's a updatable checkbox here. And when we check on this updatable checkbox, you'll notice in this general tab here under, there's a little grid and prompt. So depending on what prompts or what your BAQ set up as updatable, because you're also going to have to set up an updatable BAQ for it to be updatable in a dashboard. So what Fred demoed is very helpful, and he already made all the ones that are grayed out are ones that we can't update here at the dashboard or ask the user. So I'm going to check whatever we do have available so we can update the customer name, address, city, state, zip, and country. And again, so grid has some more properties here if you again wanted to apply a filter. Updated ability tab. So there's a few different things, and this is also dependent on how you set up your BAQ. Multi-30 row is already checked. We can't uncheck it because the BAQ allows us to update multiple rows. The BAQ also allows us to add new records to the customer table. Since we can't define a cust ID, since that's a key field in Epicor, and it's required by customer maintenance to be filled out before you can create a customer, it'll actually throw up an error if we try to add a new row within the dashboard. It'll actually turn the row red that you're trying to add and just not let you. And then static values on add new, we're just going to leave check, or we'll uncheck it since this dashboard, we don't have any plans to make this dashboard for this demo add any type of records. Another thing I like to point out here for people that they don't sometimes notice right away is all of these little titles here, labels in these within the dashboard can be modified. The caption here is one place, but each of these items in the tree view here have different captions and stuff that you can rename and kind of give it a better name. So this, we could go at my update grid or whatever you want to name it really, and that'll change this one here to update grid. And then I'll go back to the properties because maybe I want to change this one. I'll copy my caption, and maybe I want the grid caption to be the same as well as my little tab. So I'll click OK. So here's my update grid. Now you'll notice, I mean, I can kind of double click in here, and it's letting me, looks like it's going to let me do things, but it's not letting me type anything. We're going to go ahead and save this. So now that we've made our grid updatable and checked all the prompts, for updatable dashboards to work, they have to be deployed. So tools, and we'll go to deploy dashboard. And typically to enable the deploy, we have to deploy it as a smart application, and then we could deploy our dashboard. But we're not going to do that just yet. We're going to go ahead and click on test application because I want to test it before I deploy the application. Once the application is deployed, it can be added to a menu item. So I'm going to go ahead and click on test application here. And this is basically what the user will see when you do deploy and create a menu item for this dashboard. We're going to go ahead and click refresh. And now you'll notice that these fields that we selected for prompt, we're able to type in there. So for instance, if I was like, okay, this customer has a wrong zip code, I can change that 60193 very easily and then click save. And now he has a new zip code. I can hit refresh just to show you the zip code's been updated. Alrighty, so I'm going to go ahead and close out of our little test dashboard here. I will check deploy smart client because everything appeared to work exactly how I wanted, and I'll hit deploy. And later when we go and build the menu item, I can show you how to basically select your dashboard. Alrighty, and just to save a little bit of time and leave some room for questions, I did set up kind of a dashboard. I copied this dashboard really, but I want to show you how what I did. Close all. So I'll pull up. Okay, maybe not. So I'm gonna go ahead and on this dashboard here, I wanted to add a tracker, and I'm just gonna go to new tracker view, and basically on this tracker, I'm going to select cust ID and then select prompt. I'm going to check this as an input prompts only. Basically, that makes your tracker more like a search rather than like a field to fill out for information. And I'll just leave this guy. I'm trying to lay this out a little different here. Oops. Sometimes I don't like these little guys. All right, give me 1 second, guys. Because I do have an example. So this is basically the same query. This one I didn't make updatable. I disabled updatable, but this is the tracker, so you add it the same way. I just switched to the one I pre-built because I was having trouble trying to get this laid out the way I wanted it. And I deleted the chart. And another thing here, if we look at the properties of the query, on the publish, I went back and I set customer_cust ID to be published. And the reason why is this is the field we're going to use, and this is the field that we're also going to use here on the tracker that is going to automatically be filled out by our screen that we embed this dashboard into when we embed this dashboard to a customization. When I made this published, that allows the customization to find the cust ID field, and then this acts more like a filter. So like even in here, we could easily just filter out the Addison cust ID and it'll only show us the Addison data. So basically our customization is going to fill out this tracker for us and filter our data based on who we have pulled up in the sales order entry screen. So we'll jump over back to our Epicor screen here, and then I'll click these three little dots. And then I'm going to turn on my developer mode, so you do need developer mode access. And then I'm going to click and go back and search for order entry. And I'll pull up the one in sales order, sales management, order management. And then you'll get a little dialog like this. Whenever I create a new customization, rather than build one off another one, I always select base only, and then I'll click OK. So here we have customization. I'm just going to snooze this little notification so that it doesn't bother us, asking us to switch to the kinetic version. Let me let Epicor do its thing real quick. Alrighty. So you can right click and go to customization or tools customization. And then you'll get a customization tools dialog like this. And we're going to go to the wizards tab. And the wizard we're going to want to use is the sheet wizard. And I'm going to go ahead and do a new custom sheet here. And then we're going to basically select our parent sheet. So where our child sheet is going to basically live in is going to be, I want it to be the sheet top level panel 1. So I'll select sheet top level panel 1, and then I'll give my sheet definition a name, so like my dashboard tab, and then for text, I'll be like, okay, my dashboard, and then tab text, my dashboard. Once you have all that filled out, you can click add dashboard. And then you'll have some settings here. One is display the dashboard toolbar. So this is the toolbar with the refresh and save button, and then a status bar. A status bar is basically what's on the bottom here that says ready of your screen, and it'll say like querying results or something like that. So you can check these if you want to display them. I'm going to go ahead and pick my dashboard ID. So I'm going to pick the dashboard that we created, and maybe I want to display the dashboard toolbar. So I'll go ahead and select that. And I'll click next. And then your next few options, so you can either subscribe or publish. So they could basically just use the standard dashboard functionality on a new tab in this window. We can publish the data to the UI. So basically, like our dashboard can affect the data that's in our sales order screen. We can subscribe to UI data and include a retrieve button. So basically, when we pull data up in the screen, it'll add a retrieve button on that tab to pull the data back. So if this is a big complicated query that takes a while to run, we don't really want to slow down normal performance in sales order screen, you could use this one and make the user manually retrieve the data in the dashboard when they look at it. Or you can use this top one, which is based on the order they fill up. We can have the data on the sales order affect the data or filter the data in our dashboard automatically as the data is changing in our window. So we'll go ahead and select that one for this demo and then click next. And then one thing we do have to select, so you guys know that on the dashboard that I published the customer ID field. Basically, we're going to select the order header table. And I'm going to pick the ship to cust ID. And then add a subscribe column. Basically, we're going to use the ship to cust ID, fill out the cust ID in our dashboard here. And then I'll click finish. And then it'll basically say your embedded dashboard here. All your settings are at this point, but to add it to your screen, make sure you click this little arrow here, and it'll move it to custom sheets. And you'll notice up here it already added the tab. I'm going to go ahead and save my customization at this time. And again, you can check all companies or make it just a certain company. I'll go ahead and just select it, and I'll do emug demo for the name, emug demo, and I'll hit save. And I always close out and go back in anytime I'm adding like something like another tab, just to make sure the functionality works correctly. Because sometimes adding things to the UI, it might sometimes get confused, and closing out and reopening it is always a good safety net. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up a sales order. So I'll pull up, there's a few sales orders. Pull up this one. So our ship to is Addison. So when I click my dashboard, it's automatically filling out the customer ID in the tracker and filtering my data here by Addison. Just so you know, dashboards that are embedded in the screen, I haven't had any luck making them updatable because they typically have to be a menu item or deployed. And this is similar to like a dashboard runtime. So we'll go ahead and jump into menu maintenance here, and I'll go ahead and show you how to add a dashboard, like an updatable dashboard, to your menu. And I'm still in developer mode, so it's going to pop up a few extra dialogues here. But basically, when you're not in developer mode, this is the screen you'll get right away. And then you can pick, where you want to put your dashboard. So maybe we're going to do it under sales, order management, reports or something. So I'm just going to kind of pick a random place for this demo, and then I'll go to File, New Menu. And I'm just going to give it a menu ID. Again, this menu ID, it can't be the same menu ID as another menu item. So you're going to have to be kind of a little bit creative when you start, doing a lot of customizations. But your name could be anything you want. Security ID, you guys can change the security IDs. I typically copy one that a user, or one of these menu items that I know a user can access. When it's in the same department, depending on how your security is set up, you might want to change your security ID. Order sequence is another big one. I'm just going to put for this demo something in here like 888. It'll go at the bottom because none of these other menus order sequences are that high. So the program type, we have to select either, so dashboard runtime, basically you get standard dashboard functionality. When you're using dashboard runtime, it's basically not using the deployed version of your dashboard. So dashboard runtime does not work with updatable dashboards because they have to be deployed. Also, one downside about a dashboard runtime, you do lose the right-click copy to Excel functionality. And I don't know why, but on the grid, it doesn't automatically copy it to Excel. You would have to do a copy all and then paste into Excel manually. Dashboard assembly, dashboard assembly, well, the dashboard has to be deployed to even use the dashboard assembly. And I typically like to recommend this to most people to, even if it's updatable or not updatable, go ahead and deploy all of your dashboards and make them all menu items as dashboard assemblies if you're planning on making them as a menu item. That way, users still have that copy to Excel functionality. So I'll go ahead and select dashboard assembly, and then there's another drop down here. And you can go in here and search for your dashboard that you want to tie to the menu. So like my EMUG demo here, it's a DLL. If it doesn't show up in here, make sure you go and deploy your dashboard. And then you can click Save. Now, for users that are currently logged in at the time that I add this menu, they're not going to see it. Everybody has to close out and go back in. So like the next business day, once they start up their machine and log into Epicor, they'll then start seeing the menu item. So that pretty much covers everything about dashboards that I was going to go over. So at this time, I guess it's time for questions.
If you've got a question, go ahead and put it into the question area. I saw Calvin already answered a couple. And just to reiterate, since we've got a little bit of time here, we did have a question to add a customization to the dashboard. Would you need to deploy it, add it to a menu, and then add the customization? You can just right-click on the dashboard and do the customization when you're in developer, can't you, Dylan?
Correct. So on trackers, you can technically customize trackers, and then you could tap into with code, tap into the grid there. If you want to be able to add your own custom tabs with a set of custom fields and stuff like that, again, another tracker would be suffice. Although it is a little bit, I think there's some features that might be limiting in adding code to the tracker itself. But I would definitely build a customization off the menu item. Depending on your scenarios, if you don't have access to it at the customization level within a tracker, you want to do more, go ahead and build a customization just like you would on a normal menu.
And Scott Williamson, CTE queries, what are they good for? Sounds like part of a old song. In Epicor, in general, I find CTE queries are good when you need a recursive query. For example, if you're going to try and build an indented BOM bill of materials, you can do that. Beyond that, I don't care for them in Epicor myself. In SQL, CTE queries are really powerful things that you would normally do as temp tables. You can do as CTE queries, which allow you to kind of build up, again, more complex queries without making subqueries. They actually become sort of like temp tables, and the performance is pretty good inside of SQL. CTE queries, both in SQL and Epicor, can be used for recursive types of queries like the BOM. And I think I've got a presentation on that at some previous user groups. I'll see if I can dig that up and get you a link to that as well, Scott. From Marta Hoffman, by adding a dashboard to a UI, do you take a hit on performance? Dylan?
So like that auto, it kind of depends on your dashboard. Epicor 10 is really fast enough. If your BAQs in your dashboard are relatively quick and the dashboard, behaves quickly, just time your dashboard separately before embedding your customization. And then just know, like, if you're going to subscribe to UI data, that every time a user switches like a sales order, for example, it's going to take, that added time for however long it takes your dashboard. But that's why Epicor kind of put in those features as, as an optional to auto refresh your dashboard when the user opens it, as well as the subscribe. You can have it provide a retrieve button to pull the data back instead of auto retrieving when you're changing sales orders. So yeah, you can take a performance hit, and if that's a problem for your users, you're just gonna have to kind of go down the road of adding that retrieve button. You can, however, probably check that enable, auto refresh and the dashboard maintenance level before embedding your dashboard. And then you could probably subscribe and auto retrieve, because basically I think what that will do is it'll query all your data. So when you first open the dashboard, all your data will already kind of be loaded into memory there from your BAQs. And then it's just a matter of, filtering that data at that point. So that might be a way to boost performance when embedding dashboards.
Thank you. Any other questions? We kind of went a little bit over. We can hang out for a couple minutes. Otherwise, we do have lunch scheduled from 12 to 12:30. And I think Calvin had said we'll leave the lines open. And the panelists, if they're online, if you submit a question, we can try and answer those as we see them over lunch. But go get some food so you can come back and have your brain refreshed.
Yay, hailing frequencies open, Fred.
Carol Hine, can you run an SSRS from a dashboard? And yes, you can, Carol. You can embed, Calvin, you've got more experience in this. I don't think you do it in the dashboard itself. You do it in the customization, and there's a web control that you can.
You can do that in the dashboard as well. There's a URL that you can put on the dashboard and then just point the URL to your SSRS report. Perfect.
And Carol, when you do that, you may want to Google search URL parameters with SSRS, and you can actually control how that SSRS report displays in the dashboard. So like if you give them the find navigation, the page navigation, you can turn those toolbars on and off to present the report the way that you want it as well. Sorry, typing in the response to Carol here. Tim Lester, helpful tip. If you make a complex dashboard designed for normal office working, they can create users for people working remotely on VPN connections.
I'm confused.
I'm not sure what, sorry. Oh, there's a second one from Tim. Sorry, meant to say, meant to say create problems for users for people working remotely. Okay, so if you make a complex dashboard designed for normal in-office working, and
Yes.
it can create problems for people working on remote VPN connections.
Mm-hmm. So
that's
people
because,
that are working remotely on a VPN connection are not at the same network traffic speed as the local users are. And when they are working remote, do they have access to clean out their local data folder, their program data locally? Because if there was a change to the dashboard, they have to download that new DLL from the server. If they don't have security rights to update their computer or get rid of it, they could also be looking at the wrong version of the DLL that you deployed. So remote VPN versus following the GPO inside the domain, you're going to see different results. Tim, does that match the experience you're finding?
Yeah, basically, if you think about it, when a user goes remote, to talk to your server, they have to go through the internet. And, internet speeds in America, at least, are not up to par everywhere. Rather than, your local area network, the speed's much faster because you're not having to go out to the internet. You're going direct to the server and asking it for, or the dashboard is asking it for data back.
And I see, Fred, you left the Cte Queries question out there from Scott Williamson because you like the song, I think.
no, I'm typing up the response. I had to deal with the other things.
Okay.
Can you handle Christopher Moore while I keep typing here?
Yep. Tip to speed up the query execution is add a filter criteria where the company equals the BAQ constant current company. If you want, Chris, you can also speed that up by setting. If you're not multi-company, you can set that as a constant variable. That actually runs even quicker than the BAQ constant current company setting. So if you're multi-company, yes, then you're going to have to use the BAQ constant. But if you're a single company, go ahead and consider doing that as a constant, and you'll find that that speeds it up a little quicker too. As with any BAQ throughout the whole system, you want to make sure that you're always doing the company query or the company as your first criteria in any query. The only table that you don't need to do that on is the user. Don't ask, the users are not in companies.
All right, I think we got most people's questions answered. I'm going to go grab something to eat. I'll be back on in 5 minutes or so to help answer questions.
In the meanwhile, if anybody has any questions or something, go ahead and throw it into the question or the chat window. I'll go ahead and keep both of those open here during the lunch break, and I'll be keeping an eye on them for everyone. And so it begins, we have a question here. Do you know how you would print a specific job traveler with a REST call? I don't know as if I've ever tried to call the Epicor print object from a REST call, or if that's a business object call. Any techies on the group that might be able to answer this one? Fun part, David, was I intercepted Dylan on his way to lunch and threw the question at him. He's popping back to his computer to get you an answer here.
Hello. So actually, you can actually print any Epicor report or report style from the REST API. Typically, you have to kind of feed it the same, workstation and client ID parameter that Epicor already feeds it. That actually feeds it for you. For it to, and that client machine has to have Epicor opened up usually. But there is a way to, if you created a BAQ, I think it's called the sys report LST table or something like that. And within it, there's a field called report data. So you could create a REST call to print the job traveler report as a generate instead of a preview or an actual print. If it was an actual print, you could actually specify the printer for it to go to and have a server-side printer set up. But if you wanted to, have an application call the API, you'd create a BAQ that look at the sys report, the list table, and include the field report data field. And in that field, you would have to do a little bit of programming, but that field actually stores the memory stream in a string for that PDF file. So there's some samples out there in C# code on how to convert like a PDF memory stream back into a PDF file. And then in your application, after you do those REST calls to get back that report data field from your BAQ, you could actually add some additional C# code that saves a file. And the things that you might want to look up is, I think it's called Stream Reader, and there's Stream Reader has a function, and that's a C# function that you can read from a string or like plain text, that report data field into plain text in a Stream Reader, and then you would use Stream Writer to take that plain text and write it as a PDF file. But yeah, that's a way around of having to specify things like a server printer and all that if you're wanting an application to generate the report for you.
Awesome. And Tim has a comment here regarding those dashboard experiences that they've been seeing. If it is a large dashboard and it's pulling a large amount of data over, setting the auto load or auto refresh can be dangerous or detrimental to the user. So I would definitely recommend, Tim, don't turn around and set them to auto load or auto execute the query on start. Make sure the user, yes, did turn around, want that dashboard, and either let them hit the refresh button if it is a long running query, or send a smaller set of the data down to them so that it's in pieces.
And I'm gonna hop off and eat some lunch, and I will actually be on the Stump the Chump panel at I think 2:30 or so. So I'll talk to you guys again soon.
You're one of our afternoon victims. I mean, volunteers, Dylan.
Exactly.
And Andrew Lentz has another question here. They're starting to use the kinetic screens in 10.2.700. Is there any version of the Epicor Kinetic customization user guide for Kinetic? Right now, I don't think those exist, Andrew. In the beta program with the Kinetic World, and I've worked with Amy Melton for years. I don't know as if there is a document that can be freely distributed yet, since I think it was written for the version 11. I don't know if one was written for 10.2.700, but I can forward you Amy's email address. They're always looking for people to come on board into the beta program and work with the developers in bringing how Kinetic is going to interact with the system. So they're always looking for people to help. She would have access to the user guide if it's been written for that version.
Real quick, if you're in 10.2.700, go ahead and click the little question mark. At least that's the way it is for the environment I am on, but you can actually search all, and there's a lot of videos on Kinetic application maintenance. Not like a whole lot, but there's a video on Kinetic application maintenance, adding a Kinetic customized form to a menu. There's a little bit of stuff in there as far as, documentation goes. But yeah, personally, like Calvin said, I haven't seen like too much documentation on, at least on the advanced side. But if you're looking to get started and getting your feet wet a little bit, I think 10.2.700 is the one that actually has the help somewhat there.
Yep, and Andrew, if you are in the beta program or in the early adoption program, I think is what they're calling it now, you also get to meet some of the developers, and they become a great resource for figuring out, how do you do this? How do I click this? How do I deploy the dashboard properly? And so that it shows up in Kinetic. I'll go ahead and send you over Amy Melton's contact information. Emily has posted a question here. Is May still the planned date for Epicor 11? I was hearing that was moved to June, the last update that I had. So May was set for Insights. June was set for Epicor 11's release. If you're in the cloud, I would probably expect to see that probably in May before that's released to GA. And Lori Welch has posted a comment here that you can use an execution setting for the query timeout of the BAQ to 120 or 160 for remote users that are running the query. And they need to check the persist in query on that execution setting. She did also say she's not sure how high it's safe to move that number up to. So take that with a grain of salt, but that might also help the execution the execution settings for those remote users.